So I'm here with Jonathan Chapman at Native Beef today, which is a fantastic pasture-fed beef and lamb farm right in the heart of the Chiltern Hills. Hi, Jonathan.
Morning.
Really kind of you to give your time. I know time is precious in farming. It'd just be great to hear a little bit more about your story. I think with my vet hat on, I'm never happier than when I've got my wellies back on and I'm back down on the farm. And from a nutrition point of view, I guess really as a nation now, we're realising that we're all just a bit disconnected with our food and where it comes from and how it's produced, and yet those things are really pivotal for our own health. And perhaps you can just start by telling us how you're farming here.
So my father was a pig farmer, conventional intensive pig farmer. I grew up and on the pig farm, and I went to agricultural college at Silhane. It was intended that I should join the family farm. By the time I finished college, basically it was uneconomic. He'd gone from employing himself and 4 people full time to himself and 1 person, and he was still losing money. Fundamentally, that was because pig farming and poultry are all based on cereal and soya products, which are subject to world prices and vagaries. And at that point, pig prices were very low, but input prices for soya and feed wheat, things like that, were very expensive. He virtually went bankrupt. I sort of lived through all that, and I think it was even at that early stage I realised then that I was never going to be in a situation where you are reliant completely on one input and you can't go anywhere else for it.
Yeah.
You're over a barrel basically. He got rid of the pigs, and fortunately we're in the southeast, and he got change of use from the buildings to industrial, and that got him out of bother, but otherwise he would have gone bankrupt. So I went to agricultural college. When I came back, there was no job for me, so I retrained in construction management. Spent 10-15 years doing that, and then a period in horses, but I always wanted to get back into farming. That was always my dream.
Yeah.
After I've been riding for about 20 some years, this piece of land here at Bailey Hill Farm, Chalfont and Giles, came up. It was a 50-acre block that we could afford, so we sold the house in Chesham and bought this.
Right.
And then we had to move back in with my mum and dad in their granny annex. I thought getting a house here would be quite easy, but it wasn't. But anyway, long story short, we've been here now. We bought it in September 13, so we've been here 8 years and nearly, and we've developed the place. We've got buildings now. We started with 6 cows in the spring of 13. Yes, it was 13, and we're now up to 90 cows we'll be calving this year. My wife and I are real foodies and always have been, and I think I came across pasture-fed basically on the internet just one evening, and that's just as it been formed actually. So this is probably 5-6 years ago now, and I got involved, joined, went to various meetings, talked to other farmers who were pasture-based for their ruminants, and I kind of learnt the reasons why they were doing it, environmental reasons, in terms of soils have been degraded over the last 20-30 years with conventional agriculture, and that's a large part of why we got the CO2 problem and global warming going on. So we need to rectify that with permanent pasture cover. You've got green photosynthesizing plants on the soil the whole time, which are sequestrating carbon into the soil. And if you've got a nice species-rich diet like these cattle have here, where they're eating legumes and herbs and grasses, they get a balanced diet. They don't need supplementing. They do take a little bit longer to finish, maybe probably 3 or 4 months longer than maybe an animal fed on cereals and soya. So inevitably, I suppose the meat's going to cost a little bit more because it takes longer to produce, but the environmental benefits and the animal welfare benefits completely outweigh that. I started with actually bought 4 Angus cattle to try and finish. They were what I call American Anguses, very big framed animals that wouldn't finish on grass. Literally, they have a need for a very high nutrient-rich diet to put fat cover on. So we decided that wasn't for us, so we switched to Red Devons, which are a native breed, originate from Exmoor. They will finish off grass. They will live outside all year round. Ours don't here because of the poaching on the ground. and we didn't have a lot of ground, so we can't afford to poach it and then rest it for 12 months. We need to have it in use the whole year round, basically. Through the PFLA, so I learnt about sort of holistic planned grazing, where basically you're mimicking what wild animals, what herds of ruminants do in the wild, such as bison and wildebeest, where they're grazing and they're migrating north or south generally. So they keep together in a group because they've got predators around them the whole time. So they intensively graze, urinate and dung on that ground and move on. They wouldn't come back until they migrate south again. They probably wouldn't come back to the same ground for at least a year, if not more. So that can regenerate. And that way the plants are growing taller, the roots are going deeper, they're pulling minerals and water from lower in the profile, therefore the soil is more resilient.
Yeah.
What we have a situation in this country now is with modern cultivars of ryegrass, which were bred in plant breeding stations, and they're basically fed with fertiliser every 3 or 4 weeks, cut every 3 or 4 weeks, and weighed how much dry matter they produce. We've developed all these cultivars that have very lateral branching root systems that go sideways rather than down because they're fed from above. And certainly in this Chiltern area, where we've got quite thin soils over chalk, they tend to burn off every summer. So for 2 or 3 months a year, you've got no grass basically. So right from the start, I got involved with what we call herbal lays, but they're species diverse pastures, which we've got here, and immediately recognised the resilience of them in the dry summers. So when it is dry, the grasses do slow down, but the clovers and the herbs keep going. So the chicory and the plantain and things like that. All the legumes are much higher in minerals, and the old saying, "We are what we eat." Well, that's dead right. When the cattle are eating a very rich, mineral-rich diet, then it comes through in the meat. Newcastle University have been recording nutrient density of food products now since after the war, I think, and it's conclusively proved that animals that are pasture-fed and organic is more nutrient dense than conventionally farmed food is.
Yes. And of course it's that nutrient density that's just so important for us, for our own health. And there's just so much to pick up on what you've just said in that short amount of time. But how frustrated do you get, I guess, by beef just has had so much bad press, and part of what I enjoy doing is try and give clarity in that way. But when I see how you're farming here, and when you explain it so simply like that it's basically farming as nature intended, how frustrated do you get when you realise how people are just a little bit misinformed through no fault of their own in many ways?
I think you're putting it mildly. They're not misinformed, they're lied to, basically. One of the downfall of food has been that it's become commodities. So meat commodities and grain commodities and all these sort of things. It's just traded in tons, in weight, not in its actual real value, which is nutrient density. I don't get frustrated, and the reason I don't is because I'm certain that I'm doing the right thing. And I come from a farming background. Farmers they've been lambasted for quite a long time now for destroying the environment and producing cheap, nasty food, but they've only done where science has led them.
Yes, absolutely.
The problem is that most of the science that's been done in the last 20, 30 years and more has been industry-led. So clearly there is one outcome. They want to use more fertiliser, more sprays, use more machinery, to subsoil the soil. Well, if the soil is healthy, it doesn't get compacted. It's only because it's very short and organic matter that it becomes compacted. And bashing it with metal machinery is not going to do any good either.
And I think as well, it's just one of the things we've been talking about on the course actually is the miracle of cows, and it's just to be celebrated and shouted out loud, really, isn't it? This very simple story of the rain and the grass to plentiful resources in our country, and cows just convert it into nutrient-rich food. And as you're sort of explaining that, the fact that when they even just trampling around on these pastures, that they're helping that dry matter to go down into the soil as well, and fertilising it themselves.
The word that I really love now is regenerative, but the regenerative capacity of ruminant animals is unsurpassed. And you mentioned earlier about we should farm in nature's image. I think it's the expression that I love the most. Rather than we're a very I call it a metric-based society. We rely on measuring everything. Everything's got to be measured the whole time.
Yeah.
And nature is not that easy to measure.
No.
And people can draw the very wrong conclusions from far too simplistic measurements. I mean, I did this holistic management course with a company called 3LM, and that was a real eye-opener for me, because we walked around a farm like this, and we were looking at hedgerows and plants and species and what they signify. You know, if this is growing here, why is that growing there? You know, the classic one is docks. Why do dairy farms have so many docks in their pasture, and they're spraying them out the whole time? Docks have serious tap roots that can go through compaction. So if you graze dairy cows on wet ground and it gets compacted, then docks will proliferate. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
You know, and cows don't eat them, so they've got no natural predator. So they will, unless they're sprayed or chopped, they will seed, and the seeds live in the ground for about 15 years. So quite hard to control. But you've got to look back a step and say, rather than saying, oh, that's a pest, that's a disease, we've got to get rid of it, where was my management wrong that led to that point?
Yes, amazing.
And that's what I call my holistic approach.
Yeah.
And use your eyes and your other senses. Smell, as human beings now, our sense of taste and smell and things like that, we're very eyesight reliant now. Everything's hand-eye coordination the whole time. But just get a feel. You know, when you walk in a pasture, you can grab a handful of soil and smell it. If it's correct, it smells earthy. It sounds a stupid thing to say because it's earth, but a lot of the agricultural soils have no odour at all. They're just inert mineral substrates. They're not nothing anymore. There's no real life in them. I took on a farm over in Sarrett, which was arable, and it's gone into a countryside stewardship scheme called mid-tier stewardship. So it's an arable conversion, and we're all on 85 acres of arable ground. We planted herbal lays, and part of the scheme is a 5-year scheme. You have to soil test at the start of the scheme and soil test at the end to see the difference you made after 5 years. Well, the organic matter content in those soils was less than 2%.
Gosh.
Here, on permanent diverse pastures, we're between 8 and 9%.
Yeah.
Now, if you take that globally, it's beyond
huge.
Comprehension, actually, how much carbon should be in the soil that's no longer in the soil. The carbon problem's gone, disappeared. I mean, one of the things that I do get very irritated by about cows is this whole methane saga.
That was my next question.
Because it's one of the greatest con jobs that's ever been pulled.
Yeah.
And it's very simple. There are, in terms of numbers, the number of ruminants on this planet is very similar now to what it was 200 years ago. The difference is there's more domesticated and less wild ruminants now.
Right.
But the numbers are overall are pretty much the same. So the amount of methane that's produced is pretty much the same. But methane is cyclical. It has a 10-year life in the atmosphere, and it converts to CO2. Then the plants use it in photosynthesis, and it's eaten by the animals again, and the whole thing cycles. There's no more or no less. It's a closed cycle. What is causing increased carbon in the atmosphere, yes, is ploughing and releasing soil from the carbon from the ground. But more than anything, it's burning fossil fuels in whatever form, coal, oil, gas, whatever. They were in a stable form in the Earth's crust, and we have taken them out and burnt them and released that extra carbon to the atmosphere. It's got nothing to do with cows.
In fact, if anything, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they almost improve it, because I think the sort of greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture are probably thought to be about 10%. But then if you take into account the beneficial effects of the cows in actually increasing the carbon capture into the soil, then really it brings that down to about maybe 4% or something. In a way, you can sort of offset it.
You're dead right. You're dead right. And this is the trouble. All those calculations were done by the UN a while, was it 10 years ago now probably. They took no account of any sequestration going on the material the cows were eating. It was a straight cereal beef is better because it's on the planet. They can finish a cereal beef on maize and cereal and soy in probably 12, 13, 15 months, whereas a grass-fed takes 18 to 24 months. But there's no calculation done for the fact they're eating grass, which is sequestrating carbon the whole time. So it was just.
And also, I mean, they're on their natural diet that their digestion is designed for, and that also reduces their methane output anyway. I believe they produce less methane than if they're on a concentrated
Well,
There's a bit of research that's sort of suggesting that anyway.
Yes,
But it's
yeah.
maybe not as simple as that. But
No, it probably isn't as simple as that. I think a lot of things, again, it's just taken a step back and saying, well, what feels right, what looks right. I mean, the other thing with cattle is that they dung, and again, you might know more about some I don't, but the gut biome and the biome in the soil
Yes.
is not that dissimilar.
That's right.
I've
yes.
always believed that when you put cattle back on the ground, part of the reason that they regenerate the soil is because they're actually inoculating the soil with
Absolutely, yes.
microbiology again.
Yes, yeah.
Apart from the fact they're dunging and they're providing a habitat for dung beetles and other insects to lay their eggs in, to hatch, for the birds to eat. So it's just a win-win-win situation when you put animals back on the ground again.
Yeah.
And even in arable rotations now, we have massive problems with blackgrass and brome and you name it. Other diseases take all, and God knows what, and it's all because we're not practicing proper rotations anymore. You know, when the original Norfolk full course rotation was invented, it was a full course. It was a full year with a year of fallow in it. Research now says actually we should be going at 6, 7, 8, 9 year rotations, and then you don't get disease build up. The whole controversy over oilseed rape and neonicotinoids.
Yes.
We wouldn't need neonicotinoids if they didn't keep growing rape every third year.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. It's not rocket science.
No.
And what frustrates me is when the NFU, National Farmers Union, spend loads of money lobbying and campaigning to keep neonicotinoids, rather than saying, actually educating farmers, saying, whoa, hold on.
Why we need them
why
in
do
the
we need
first
it?
place. Yeah.
Because you're growing rape every third or fourth year. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
Why have we got to take all in wheat? Because you're growing wheat every third or fourth year.
Yes.
If you were growing every 6, 7 years, you'd never have a build-up with disease. You'd never have a problem. You know, and look, we're not organic because we don't. We're organic thinkers, not in practice. And the reason we're not in practice is because land tenure in this country creates a lot of issues. Most of it's very short term. So I have a lot of ground. We own 50 acres here. We actually farm 700 acres, and all the rest is on short tenure. So 1 year grazing licenses, 3 year farm business tenancies, and 5 year farm business tenancies. To go into any environmental scheme or organic, you have to 5 years plus legal control of the land. Yeah. So that precludes us from ever being organic, even though we practice organic farming.
Yeah.
But to be fair, I don't see that as a loss particularly.
No.
I think that what we're doing in terms of pasture-fed is more important.
Yeah.
And around here, which is very much an arable area, well, it used to be livestock. When I was a child, all this area was dairy farms and livestock. These soils are not really suitable for arable farming. They benefit a lot from putting stock back on the ground again. I wish the NFU would spend a lot more time actually educating farmers, saying, well, let's do this and let's do that. And you know, I hope that with the new environmental land management scheme, the ELM scheme coming in, that it will basically encourage that through remuneration.
Yeah, because you know, I'm with you. The whole regenerative agriculture movement now is just so exciting that it's really starting to get so much more momentum. But presumably for a lot of farmers, it's a huge thought to have to make that change. And I love the fact that farmers do learn from farmers.
That's the only way.
You know, which is brilliant.
When I first started here,
I
know that all my local neighbouring farmers that are doing some sort of weirdo, doing something strange, you know. And I said to them, I'm pasture-fed. What do you mean pasture-fed? We're all pasture-fed. Anyway, I explained the arguments. You know, the seed fell on stony ground, shall we say. But I know for a fact now that a lot of them are taking note.
Yes.
And I've got arable farmers ringing me up saying, do you know what, I'm going to plant a cover crop this year of stubble turnips or forage rape or something. Have you got some sheep to graze it?
Yeah, brilliant.
So I've got some land in Missington. I've been offered 100 acres of cover crops to graze this winter with the sheep, which is great. They did it last year for the first time. They saw the benefits of it.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to keep the soil covered the whole time with something growing in it, so it feeds the soil biology the whole time.
Yeah. So this field that's right opposite us now, so I should say we're sitting among different grasses and there's clovers. How long is this one empty for that's opposite us? The cows are just beside it.
Empty for about 4 weeks now.
Right,
about a month. And it'll be empty for this time of year, it'll be empty for another 2 weeks at least.
Right.
So the rotations in the spring, when the grass is growing rapidly, are probably 30 days, and then they gradually edge them out to 60 days plus by the autumn.
Okay. Yeah.
But what we do also do is every year we change the rotation, so we're not grazing that field between those dates every time.
Okay.
Because everything flowers at different times.
Different times.
So
yeah,
by varying
right.
the rotation,
Okay.
so if that was grazed the first week, most of these fields were grazed for 5 days,
Yeah.
and then moved. So that was 5 days at the beginning of March, 1st to the 5th. Next year that'll be jumped on 2 weeks
Yeah.
or 3 weeks, or go earlier
Yeah.
even. So that each year different species within the sward get a chance to flower and complete
Yeah.
their life cycle, basically,
Yeah.
rather than being chomped off the whole
Yeah.
time.
And then the beauty of that is that, getting back to the sort of nutrient density and the type of beef that you're producing, then that actually helps to increase some of the unsaturated fats
Yes.
in the meat,
Yeah.
which is a fabulous thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So the meat is better for us. The way you're farming it is totally in line with nature and obviously helping the planet. And you mentioned cost, so of course it's going to be a little more expensive, but then my own sort of feeling on that is because we should be eating beef a little bit less, as in not having it every day.
Yeah.
So therefore, when you do eat it, let's get really good quality beef. We pay a little bit more for it. We know it's fantastic quality. We know how it's been produced, and it's better for our health. And then for you as the farmer, you are actually producing a food. You mentioned this whole thing of farmers just producing commodity, and actually to get back to actually realising that you're actually producing the food, you're feeding the nation, and
it's a sentient creature. It's not a side of beef to me. It's a cow. It's a living animal.
Yeah.
And that's, I say, we just got away from that. Everything's got an ear tag. Everything's got a number.
Yes.
Everything's got a weight by it the whole
Yes.
time. Everything's got a growth rate by it the whole time.
Yeah.
The fact is, anything grown fast is never very good. Whether that be grapes, whether it be apples,
Yeah.
strawberries by irrigation. They look red and they're lovely to look at, but they have no flavour.
Yeah.
To develop real flavour,
Yeah.
is it terroir they call it? I never know.
Well, it's like the animal equivalent of sourdough.
It needs time. Our animals are older. When I was 13, I was lean and mean. By the time I got to probably 23 I was, but by the time I got to 33, I started to lay down a bit of fat. And
Yeah.
we all know that the flavour is in the fat,
Yeah.
and the fat base of the meat was cooking. So, if you've got a joint, a topside joint off an animal that's 13 months old, it will be like 90%, 95% lean. So, it's difficult to cook, because if you go 5 minutes over, it's tough. It'll have no flavour. What's the point? I had a girlfriend years ago who used to say to me, "That's not worth getting fat for." So she would, if we were eating a meal, she ordered something and it wasn't what she thought it was going to be, she'd just stop eating it.
Yeah.
And she'd say, "That's not worth getting fat for."
Yeah.
And that's my motto now, is if it's, don't just eat it because it's there.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, have less of it, have some really flavoursome meat, have some flavoursome vegetables. We buy vegetables from 10 Mile Menu, who are organic and they're local, and they come in a box and they're all covered in earth and all the rest of
Okay.
it. But I have to say, the carrots are absolutely, they're the
You
one thing I love.
just taste
Carrots,
the difference.
they're outstanding.
Yeah. And it's the same with beef. I always remember my children saying to me the first time we grew potatoes, it's like, wow, this is what they're meant to taste like.
Yeah.
And it's the same with beef. The taste is so much better.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I found actually as a family in changing the way that we're buying our meat and trying to get it directly from the producer where we can, is you actually just have more of a respect for the food.
Yes.
And for the animal.
Yeah.
And talking to you this morning, and it reminds us of how they're very much just part of nature. We're all just part of this one ecosystem.
Yes.
In balance, aren't we?
Yeah.
And actually it's just having respect for nature, having respect for the animals. You say they have a longer life here, they have a much happier life. It's all balance.
We simulate. The other thing I've in terms of animal welfare, we are also certified by a greener world as animal welfare approved and grass fed. It's an American organisation,
Oh, okay.
very big organisation, sort of parallel or similar to the PFLA in lots of ways. But one of the things that I went to Silhane, which is the West Country, is a dairy college, basically agricultural college, and I always used to look at the cows, and basically they had permanent diarrhea the whole time. And at the time, I don't know why it didn't occur to me more at the time. I was like, that's not how it should be.
No.
And we had dairy cows as well documented. I think the average for a dairy cow is 2.5 or 2 3/4 lactations. So it means that there aren't many dairy cows over 5 years old, which is a shocking statistic. We got cows at 13 here that are still producing calves and still doing fine.
Amazing.
14 this year actually.
Amazing.
And I know people who've got them at 17 or 18.
Yeah.
But the rumen is designed to ferment fibre.
Yes.
If you feed high sugar, simple sugars, monosaccharides, and protein to the rumen, it doesn't function correctly, and quite the opposite. It actually, it's like probably having heartburn the whole time. And then diarrhea at the other end, and it's no wonder that dairy cows aren't very happy. It's a miracle they produce milk at all, but they do. And they're I've also said this: cows are the most stoical creatures on earth. They are so tough, unbelievably tough animals. They put up with and tolerate things like that, which they shouldn't do. Other animals just wouldn't tolerate; they die. But cows just carry on somehow. But we watch the cows and how much time they spend lying down, chewing the cud, which cows should do. But if their diet lacks fibre, they don't do that. They're always agitated the whole time, always moving around the whole time.
So they're stressed, and that affects their own health, like it affects our health. And helicopter going over. So just before we finish, it's so great talking to you this morning. But you've just finished calving. Just talk us through that process now. So, how long will the calf stay with the mother? What?
So we run a system here which is basically spring and autumn calving. Because we have a butchery and we need 2 cattle a week for the butchery, basically a year-round supply. If you have them all in the spring, you end up with some animals that get over fat at the other end. Because we have to keep them for so long. So we've now split, so it's 60 calving in the spring and 40 in the autumn. So the cows will calve between the middle of March, the spring one, the middle of March to the middle of May, 8-week period. They turned out 3 days after they calve normally. We calve them inside again from a welfare point of view. I can keep a much better eye on them if they're in the barn. I just walk around at 3 in the morning, switch the light, I can check 60 cows, and if anything's calving. I mean, this year I think I've helped 3 cows out of 60. When I say help, one had a leg back when it was being born, one came breech, and one was just a big calf.
Just get on with it.
But otherwise, just get on with it. But the main thing is to make sure the calf gets up and drinks straight away, so it gets its colostrum. And then they go out after normally 3 days to a week, and then they spend the whole summer and autumn with their mother. They come in as late as possible, so normally early December. They come into the barn with their mothers, and we have a barn divided into 2/3, 1/3, which is the whole barn's open to start with, and then we have what we call weaning bars. So we have they're adjusted to the width of the calf, so the calf can go into one end. And by this stage, the cows are getting a bit cheesed off with them anyway. And they're the milk's starting to dry up. So the calves sort of ganged up in their little mob, so they tend to migrate to the calf end of the barn, and we feed basically first cut silage, which is higher in sugars and sweeter basically. So they naturally migrate that way, and then after they've done that for a month, we should close the bars up so the calves are next to their mothers, but they can no longer suck off their mothers. So it's a completely stress-free way of weaning them. Because if you just remove the calves altogether, both the calves and the cows,
the bellowing starts,
and they don't grow for about 3 weeks. So it's not great. Well, this way they don't ever stop growing.
It really is win-win. And actually, it sounds like you have fewer vets bills as well, which is always a good thing.
Absolutely, yes. We use Norcal in Tame, Evan, who's a really nice chap and a very good vet. And I always, when he's going, I say, well, I hope not to see you for quite a while. But we don't. I mean, the way the vets are involved now is much more on an advisory capacity as opposed to a curative capacity. So much involved with flock health plans, herd health plans, and we talk about what we've done each year. We have a meeting every year. We sit down, we talk about what we've done, what's worked, what hasn't worked. Worming schedules, for instance, now when I first started to worm everything like regimentally at certain times, we don't worm the senior cows at all now, and the yearlings they're the one vulnerable group, I suppose, because they have developed a certain amount of immunity grazing with their mothers, but not a full immunity. So they're weaned, they are wormed before they go out. But they're wormed in the barn, so any ivermectin is in the dung. The dung is then composted. We use something called bokashi, which is anaerobic composting. And
so actually, when they're out on the pastures, there's no
ivermectin going on the pastures at all.
Amazing.
From any of the cattle, and the sheep the same. If we have to worm the lambs, cattle develop immunity over their lifetime, whereas sheep tend not to. Having said that, we don't worm the ewes at the moment either. And we've got away from this again by pasture management, so we keep moving them the whole time. Worms are generally a problem when you set stock, when you keep animals on a bit of ground for a long time, because the eggs come out in their dung, they hatch, the worms larvae crawl up the grass, sit about this at height, and then they get ingested again. we have what I call tall grass grazing, where you can see this pasture here now. It's probably 12 inches, some of that. That'll be 18 inches by the time they go in. They tend to graze off the top of it.
Okay, so they don't get down to
yes,
where
it's
they
the old
so
graze a third, trample a third, and leave a third.
Okay.
So it regenerates quicker because you've got more photosynthesis from more green matter that's left.
Yeah.
Rather than traditionally at college we used to graze it down to like 2 inches.
Which is when they'll start to.
Which is when it starts to
take on
ingest the
board
worm eggs.
yeah.
So things like that, that's where the vets are really involved now. And we do feces and egg counts before we worm anything. If we think something's not quite right, first of all we take some dung samples. Feces and egg count. Is it a worm bird? No. Okay, it's something else.
Yeah.
And then we work out what we, rather than just think, oh, it's worms, let's worm them.
Yeah.
You know, so we're much more, selective about when and how we treat.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's just hugely interesting speaking to you, and sitting here today, it can all seem like a very rosy picture. We're in among the hedgerows and the red kites and various other birds are flying around, and the insects and the biodiversity is thriving. So it's fantastic, and I hope it's the future of farming, but I know it's also a very hard and busy job. But
the tide is turning.
Yes.
I've always been an optimist all my life. We started this, how many years ago, and we were very lonesome, but the pasture-fed membership's going up all the time. There's something called Groundswell over at Hitchin today and tomorrow, which is a regenerative farming kind of show that has grown in popularity unbelievably in the last 3 or 4 years. The Oxford Real Farming Conference at Oxford now, as opposed to the Oxford Farming Conference, which is the alternative one, or the Oxford Real Farming Conference, the alternative one. That I first went there 5 years ago, whenever there was a few hundred people there. Now thousands. You can't get tickets now.
Yeah.
So there is a groundswell movement now,
Yeah.
and I really believe the tide is turning. But farmers, everything they do is over a long time. You can't just change things suddenly. It's not like most businesses. If you try to change your breeding policy, it takes 3 years for it to come through, more often. Same with your rotation of cropping. So farmers, if they're a bit slow on the uptake, it's deliberate, because things can't just happen quickly. They have to look at it and really believe it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And they learn best by watching, going to visit a farm like this or another farm, regenerative farm, and go, actually, yeah, that makes sense. And he's doing it, and it works. I'll try it.
Yeah.
You know,
Awesome.
things are changing.
Well, on that note, I mean, it's a positive note, and it's a joy to speak to you, and also to spread your story, because these, we need to get the positive side of farming out there.
Yes.
It's all good.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.